Hey guys, the Season of Discovery Phase 4 PTR went live just earlier today, and a massive amount of people all logged in to check out the upcoming changes, and when I joined I was shocked at the amount of players, lack of layers, and inconsolable amount of Lua errors that I was met with. I think this PTR is so popular, not only because it's the first SoD PTR, but it's coming at such a pivotal moment in Classic WoW. The community has never been more split up with players, and I feel like that's talked about all the time within the past 4 years, but it's just crazy. We now have 5 different versions of just Classic WoW to choose from, and more if you include player-made game types with Blizzard support, like the fresh movement on Classic Era's Deviate Delight, where Blizzard has locked server transfers to and from the server to support the event. The 2 most popular of the classic versions are probably Cataclysm and Season of Discovery, and only SoD now because of the PTR. But with Cata not being as popular as the original trilogy of classic WoW versions and Season of Discovery being a little more like Season of Disappointment, a lot of players are still lost on how they should be splitting or spending their WoW game time. Cataclysm Classic seems to be doing well so far, but it's still very early days. SoD saw classic launch levels of participation, but as time went on, it saw more like Battle for Azeroth levels of departure, to include myself and pretty much everyone I've ever played WoW with. Now, I'm sure everyone has their own thoughts on why Phase 2 and 3 weren't as successful, and I'll share my thoughts on SoD as a whole eventually. Regardless, this PTR has the entire community's attention. It's the first glimpse at what level 60 will look like. It's the first PTR SoD has had, and it's the first time we're getting an idea of what Blizzard thinks Classic Plus looks like. And the reason I say that is because we are in level 60 end game content. If you ask anyone what Classic Plus looks like, they're usually always talking about end game content. They're not talking about changing the way the leveling works, or even like reimagining any of the raids that we see while leveling from 1 to 60. But when we talk about Classic Plus, we're talking about level 60 stuff, level 60 content. When you first log into the PTR, you will immediately notice that your bags are basically full, and that's largely because there's new versions, or at least a new version of the Dungeon Set 1. There are 2 to 3 new versions of the Dungeon Set 2, depending upon your class and if it can heal or not. The new Dungeon Set 1 actually has green text on it, where before it was that was exclusively on Dungeon Set 2, as well as some slightly reworked stat values. I can tell you right off the bat, this version is a 100% upgrade from its vanilla form, just at a glance you can tell. And as for the 3 new epic-ish versions, it seems like there's 1 for each class playstyle, with classes that can tank seeing a second DPS set, and hybrids having a 3rd for healing. There are new sets that come with new color schemes, some of which are much better than the original. It's currently unknown how the second dungeon set will be unlocked. I don't think it's safe to assume that these will be guarded behind their former quest line. There's really just no telling when it comes to SoD. I assume that set 1 will still come from level 60 dungeons, but I shudder to think at what Blizzard could come up with as a way to get these suits that were once hardly used and extremely time consuming to get, and now make them accessible to the kind of player base they seem to be trying to attract here. Regardless, at the start of Phase 4, these will be highly sought after if they are indeed available. It seems like they will. If this does end up being locked behind the same quest chain as in vanilla, the price of arcane bars and crafting materials will be unheard of, and it will force a lot of people to yet again make a tough decision with professions, in keeping with the last 3 seasons of SoD. I guess we'll see. I just hope that these suits are not handed out like we saw in the Emerald Dream repetition sets, being like 6 pieces of Prebis for almost every class and spec. Part of what was so fun about Season 1 was not only discovering what was new to vanilla, but also what was already in the game, but now worth pursuing or getting because we were gated at level 25. The new meta and the new BIS and the new way to play that came from being gated. Handing this new gear out would put an early power creep into a part of the game when we are not supposed to feel powerful, and the game is arguably at its most challenging, and I'd say its most fun, but so far the developers have done really little to keep this season in touch with the spirit of vanilla, and far prefer trying to attract players who just don't really seem to like vanilla at all. While there is no raid content featured in the PTR as of making this video, we do get a boss test work as a SoD version of Patchwork from Naxxramas, who is standing in this hidden zone called the Searing Basin. Outside the cities, there are target dummies or training dummies where people are testing out the new runes and damage rotations. I won't cover all of the cloak runes, but they do appear to be mostly reworked versions of various expansion abilities. Something interesting about the ring runes is that they all appear to either be weapon specialization or school specializations. So mages have frost, fire, and arcane runes that all increase the chance to hit with those schools, and weapon runes that work similarly to racial specializations. So I guess big rip if you rolled a human this go around, because orcs still have stun resist and bloodlust, so unless you really hate rep grinds and invisible people who are standing right in front of you, it seems like humans are no longer mandatory, which is something that we've known was coming this season for a while now. Something that I thought was funny is that warriors don't have a Titan's Grip rune, which I think is something a lot of people kind of suspected or wanted or didn't want, but they also spawn with 2 Arcanite Reapers in their bags, which I thought was kind of funny. I don't think there was too much thought put into what was going into their bags, but it did make me consider that maybe there are some specialty runes that they're still keeping secret, like Titan's Grip or Pally Wings or things of that nature. Personally, I couldn't care less if warriors get that or about any of those. I'm not a big fan of Wrath anyways, but I think it's a nice idea to keep some runes a secret. I just don't know how likely it is. I think it's safe to assume that this PTR is being treated as a real PTR, and all abilities are on the table for testing for it. From what I can remember about the classes, I did play a lot for the first 2 seasons. It did seem like some of the runes had been moved around to different slots, therefore changing the previous combinations and builds, so that is pretty huge. I remember on Paladin, you couldn't use the Exorcism rune and the Avenger Shield rune because they were in the same slot. You had to choose between the 2 of them for PvP, and there were use cases for both and some debate as which was best. Well, now it doesn't matter. You can use them both. And speaking of PvP, to me at least, it felt a lot better than the last time I played, which was like Phase 3, Week 1. Despite my UI and abilities and key bindings all being pretty screwed up from being on the PTR and not really remembering what any of my runes did or how they worked or any of the new ones, I was able to enjoy the BGs without getting globaled, so there was that at least. It seems like there's no longer a PvP buff that reduces the crit and increases player stamina. Maybe there's something still going on the back end and not visible, but for now Blizzard doesn't appear to be tiptoeing around the idea of adding resilience into vanilla. I don't like resilience, but I also don't like 32 new runes in vanilla, so who cares at this point? Just add it if you want it. The game is a circus. Shamans and Shadow Priests are still nukes, but the damage didn't feel any more unreasonable than in actual vanilla. It's very bursty, but there is at least some time to react, and there's a possible line of play. I just don't know what it is, but I'm sure there's people out there who have figured it out. But anyways, on to the task at hand. With all of these changes, do I think it's enough to save SoD? And I guess I'd say potentially. And what do you mean by save? If a month ago you asked an Era or a Kata Classic, Wrath Classic player, they'd say that SoD is stupid and dead. And if you ask SoD players, they'd say that there's a solid, dedicated community and it doesn't need to be saved. If you asked me, I'd say it's beyond saving, at least beyond the point to get me to stick around longer than just popping in to try the new stuff out. And to be fair, it's not anything that's happened over the past 2 seasons that specifically. I was reluctant about this SoD idea to begin with. I made a video about it, and there's videos about Classic Plus that I didn't make because I wasn't sure how it should be done or what I wanted to see. And I knew from the beginning with SoD, this power creep needed scrutinous supervision. But, I tried to let that go when it came out, and I went really hard the first 2 phases of SoD. I had 5 level 25s, it was very easy. It was very approachable. It was fun. I had 2 on Horde, 3 on Alliance. The 3 ally tunes went on to level 40. Phase 2 really felt bad at the time, but not enough for me to try to kill everyone's buzz or speak it into existence. Those first 2 phases, it was just potential, It's like there were bad things about them, but there was potential and there was time to fix it, and there wasn't enough phases for there to be patterns or repeat offenders. The problems weren't necessarily permanent, and it could all be resolved. It could only get better from there, right? Well, Phase 3 verified those problems. It confirmed those patterns. Things start feeling like a waste of time. You lose faith in a company that you put very little faith into to begin with. Phase 3 kind of opened our eyes. They're like, okay, this is another Blizzard treadmill. They're famous for it. Endlessly grinding, never feeling like you're going anywhere. Give them big numbers, or don't even give them big numbers. Phase 1 had enough runes and enough new abilities to last an entire game. There was more new abilities in Phase 1 than there was in TBC. It was too much for them to manage, and it's all on a 1.5 second global cooldown. There's no mastery to aid with it. So naturally, retail players don't like it. Too slow pace for retail players. Too much to do and too wide a gap. And the classic players think it feels like retail light when they wanted Classic Plus. They wanted vanilla, expanded. So if to you, save SoD means it's not going to be like retail light anymore, then I'd say more than likely it will be. Even if they keep the dungeon sets locked behind a long time consuming cross-continent quest line, this will only serve to piss off the retail and Kata Andes, who are probably the closest parties to potentially enjoying this season, and it will marginalize the vanilla players who have done this grind before and know that it's not pretty, and they would have quit regardless because the game is already too far gone. And if they decide to hand it out, the dungeon set 2s, if they decide to hand them out at level 60, like they did with the brain rot, unironically named Grindfest Emerald Nightmare suits, then I'd say SoD is more likely going to be just stuck with that small, tight-knit community of dedicated players. And I think at this point, Blizzard has designed their way into being damned if they do, damned if they don't when it comes to Season of Discovery. You can't please everyone, and you sure as hell can't please anyone without a budget or a realistic development cycle and a 20-year-old beloved, cherished video game as your template. There's a lot of things that SoD could have been. I wanted it to be Classic Plus, but it ended up kind of turning into the rehashing of vanilla content that didn't need to be rehashed, but they chopped it up into retail-sized pieces. Vanilla players don't like it, classic players don't like it, and retail players don't like it. Its player base seems to be comprised of streamers who are farming it for content, and their chats who are helping them, and then sprinkled on top of that, you have a few outliers from those other camps who legitimately seem to have found a way to enjoy it. And that's fine. I'm super happy for you if that's you. It's just not what I hope for. I think it's not what the majority, it's not what 80 to 90% of people hoped for. And I know, I'm just old, irrelevant grump who's too stuck up in my ways probably. But this could have been so good. And I'll leave you this before I go, and I'll get off my soapbox. I heard someone the other day, I was watching Crossbone's stream, and they asked how he planned to grow his stream playing a dying game. And if you don't know, Crossbones is a classic era streamer. He's just a vanilla Andy. And I couldn't help but giggle at this question. This question came up when he was talking about why he plays era over SoD. And I just found it funny how everyone always assumes or is saying vanilla is dying. And this viewer was like, how could you expect to grow your stream playing this dying game when SoD is the new thing? And if you just go on SoD right now and look at Stormwind and Ogremar and compare it to Classic Era, what is the dying game? What looks like the dying game? How could you grow your stream on SoD? Seems like everyone who's playing it already has the stream and they have the spurgs to help them complete the content. And I assume, there's a lot of people who are raiding Sunken Temple right now, and I'm sure it's not hard to get a group together. But for so many of us, vanilla WoW is the thing. And when a season ends or it unalives itself or a classic expansion turns out to be not as good as we remember it, or we just grow bored with it, we always go running back to Classic Era. And it's not like I'm part of some classic era network. It's like I'll even like log in and you'll hear people in the game talking about like, wow, there's a lot of people getting on recently. It's like we don't even have to say it to each other. It's like, this thing sucks. Let's go back to where we like it. And Blizzard does their best to make sure people think it's dead. You can't blame that dude for asking that question. You can't blame people for thinking that it's dead. All the era realms are combined into clusters, but they still all advertise as low pop. There's like 5 daytime NACs and AQ runs before 5 o'clock server time, but it's still somehow advertised as low pop. They have layered major cities, but it's still low pop. And it like low pop compared to what? Because if you go to Dragonflight City, or whatever it's called over there, I bet it looks the same way as Stormwind or Orgrimmar on Era on a Wednesday night. And Twitch is always asking Era players why they're playing vanilla and not SoD. Well, look at SoD in comparison. It doesn't look anything like Era. So how exactly is Crossbones playing a dying game? It's dead to Blizzard. But SoD's dead to a lot of us. To the majority of people, SoD's dead. And if it wasn't for this new PTR, I mean, I think it would be doomed. A lot of people are excited about it. A lot of those people are content creators. And there's a lot of season left to be played. It could be great for the majority of the players. Maybe 90%, one day 90% of people really enjoy it. But it isn't the version of Classic Plus that I'd like to see. And, for now, it's just not SoD. Thanks for watching. I'll see you out there. If you'd like to support the channel or help me create more content, please follow me over on Twitch at nilly.tv. I'm going to be streaming Classic Fresh on Deviant Delight, or feel free to like this video and comment your own opinions. Maybe you disagree with all of it. Maybe I'm cracked, but you're probably in the minority, dude. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you out there.